Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Housing and Communities Committee for the 23rd of March 2022. This is going to be the last meeting of this committee under this session of the council. A sad moment, perhaps, and we'll keep the tissues to the end, if I may ask. I had hoped that we might be able to meet in person as this being the last committee meeting. Unfortunately, that's not been possible because obviously ongoing restrictions. We are where we are, so we'll have to accept that we'll have to meet virtually in this case. And while talking about that, I've been reminded that today is the second anniversary of lockdown for the COVID pandemic. Life has changed dramatically for all of us one way or the other, and probably will not go back to as it was. Hybrid working is now pretty much the norm, but the 2 years has passed very quickly, I might add. Bearing in mind, a lot of the time we were locked down and restricted in our movements, but 2 years have passed, and hopefully we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel for this pandemic, but we shall see. So members, let's get moving. Let me first of all introduce the top table, virtual top table. I have with me Councillor Chris Ahern, Vice Convener, Barbara Renton, Executive Director, Communities, Claire Mailer, Deputy Director, Communities, and Adam Taylor from Committee Services. As we know, this is a virtual meeting, so as always, I have my chat box open. If you have Q for a question or C for comment, that will help me pick up who wants to speak. So first of all, could I ask, do we have any apologies or substitutions this morning?
No apologies this morning at all, Convener, no.
Thank you. The full house for the last one. Good. So therefore, Adam, could I ask you to do a roll call for us so that we know who's here?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Convener. Councillors, when I call out your name, if you can just indicate whether you're present in the meeting. Councillor Ahern.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Liz Barrett.
Present.
Sorry, Convener, I forgot about you, but we know you're here, so we'll skip past you. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Present.
Councillor Jarvis.
Here.
Councillor Massey.
Present.
Councillor McCall.
Present.
Councillor McEwen.
Present.
Councillor Shires.
Present.
Councillor Smith.
Good morning. Present.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
And Councillor Waters.
Present.
Thanks, councillors.
Thank you, Adam. So move on to the next part of the agenda. Do we have any declarations of interest this morning? If you could put DI in the chat box. I'll wait for a second or two. I don't expect any, but fine. Okay. Next item on the agenda. Can we all agree the minute of the last meeting, which was Monday, the 24th of January, 2022? Are we all in agreement of the minute, please?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you, members. Thank you very much. So next item on the agenda is the fire and police reports, which I normally hand over to the Vice Convener, which I will do in a second. But if I may just add a short note, perhaps some of you may not know, but although this is our last meeting, it's also the last meeting for Chief Inspector Graham Binney. He has been promoted, which is congratulations to him, of course, on that, and is moving on to other things. So this is his last meeting. I'm sure he'll want to say something when we get to the police reports. He's going to be replaced by Tom Leonard, an experienced police officer, obviously, who has already served in Perth and Kinross in the past as a detective inspector in the CID. He lives locally. I believe he's going to be online with us today, and I'm sure he'll want to speak and introduce himself as we go along. So, if I may now pass over to the Vice Convener for the fire and police reports. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Convener. You have a question in the chat from Councillor Stewart before I start.
Wait, sorry, didn't expect that. Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. Sorry, it was it wasn't a comment on the minute. It was just a follow-up question. At the November committee meeting, we were told about the housing issues for complex care, certain complex care patients, and we were informed that they would be moving into specially built accommodation by the start of or early this year, and we also asked about delayed discharge times, the sort of total delayed discharge time, and I just wondered whether officers were able to update the committee given the commitments at the previous meeting about that.
Claire, could I ask you perhaps just to comment on that?
Thank you,
Carry on.
Thank you, Councillor Braun. Elaine Ritchie, are you on? Elaine should be on the call and may be able to respond to the question.
Yes, I'm here. I don't have the exact timescales because there's been some delays with the new builds, but I can get some information back to the committee, and we just need to be a bit careful because it is small numbers and the clients could be easily identified.
Thank you, Elaine. Are you happy with that for the moment, Councillor Stewart? I can get back to you outside the committee.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So thanks for Chris pointing it out, and over to you, Chris, now.
Thank you very much, and good morning, committee. Just to let you know that we have spoken both to the fire and the police, and there are no private sessions required this morning. So we'll go straight into paper 4, which is the fire report. And can I ask Area Manager Stephen Wood and Ewan Baird to introduce the report, please?
Good morning, committee members, and thank you very much, Vice Convener. I'm pleased to present the Q3 performance report to you today. Hopefully you've had time to digest it and you've found it helpful. Before I discuss it in a bit more detail, I would like to provide a short update on the recent unwanted fire alarm signal consultation, which closed at the tail end of last year. Thank you to all of you that contributed. Your feedback that we received, it's been instrumental in shaping our plans and how we aim to implement this change. The board of the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, they met in December and they selected option A with some additional revisions based on the feedback. So you may recall that this was to call challenge all automatic fire alarm signals from non-domestic premises unless they were exempt. And these exemptions now include hospitals and all sleeping risks. This option is predicted to achieve around a 57% reduction in UFAS calls, and I really welcome the opportunities that this will bring, which will help us increase our community safety education work in the area. But one of the key themes that came through from the consultation responses was a concern from duty holders around their level of understanding of their responsibilities. And whilst those responsibilities, they haven't changed as a result of this policy, we do recognise that the challenges being faced by businesses at this time post-COVID, or hopefully post-COVID, they are significant and we don't want to burden them anymore. So the board took the decision that we would delay the implementation of the UFAS change. It's now scheduled for April 2023, and we will use that time to ensure that we've engaged with and supported as many duty holders as possible. Locally, we'll do that through our existing fire safety enforcement audit programme, and nationally, we'll engage with as many trade bodies, national organisations as possible, just to give as many duty holders the opportunity to work through what their responsibilities are, and we can make sure that the policy is implemented as smoothly as possible. So hopefully that gives you some comfort that the feedback that we received through the consultation has been acted on, and we'll use that delay wisely within the local area to support our businesses. I would like now to move to the performance summary on page 18 of your pack, and ask members to scrutinise, comment and note the Q3 performance report. The summary provides details on the 12 headline indicators which support the 6 priorities in the local fire and rescue plan for Perth and Kinross. You'll see a positive trend against our target figure for accidental dwelling fires and accidental dwelling fire casualties and fatalities. And we see a similar pattern reflected when we look at the non-domestic fires as well. When we look to the road traffic collisions, we see that the year-to-date trend is positive in both the number of incidents and the number of casualties, but this is a result of strong performances in quarters 1 and 2, as the Q3 figures have increased slightly. Q3 also saw 2 fatalities on our roads within Perth and Kinross. And for the final 3 indicators, we've seen a rise in the number of UFAS incidents, and we're unlikely to meet our annual target in this area, but obviously the UFAS consultation looks to address that area of concern. And the number of deliberate fires are higher in both than what we would like to see in both the primary and secondary fires. That's largely as a result of earlier spikes in the year, and the quarter 3 figures themselves are heading back in the right direction. We'll hope to maintain that performance. So I'd like now to invite Group Commander Ewan Baird to provide a little bit more context around the indicators and some of the other work that we've been carrying out across quarter 3. So Ewan, if you would.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Stephen. Just to go into a little more detail, as you'll see from the performance summary on page 18 of your report, the KPIs are looking largely positive. And the indication that on many of the KPIs will meet our annual targets come Q4. Looking at accidental dwelling fires, which we've got a primary focus on, we reported 23 incidents during quarter 3 against an average of 29. 15 of these incidents recorded no heat or smoke damage and low attendance times, and no households during this period sustained significant damage. So although they were showing 23 incidents, it's quite positive to see that there was no significant losses during that period. There was no accidental dwelling fire fatalities during this period, and there were 4 casualties during quarter 3. All 4 of these casualties were treated on scene, and there was no attendance at hospital for any of them. Non-domestic building fires, with 11 fires, all fires were low level, with also low attendance times at these incidents. And as the Area Commander mentioned, RTCs, we've seen a rise in RTCs, 29 RTCs during quarter 3. 10 of these RTCs required more technical execution to remove casualties. Of the 29 RTCs, unfortunately, we had 2 fatalities. One was recorded in Murphley, which was probably more a medical emergency than an RTC. And the other one that received quite a lot of press interest was the lorry that toppled over at the Craigend junction just outside Perth. There were 21 non-fatal casualties for this period with regards to RTCs. UFAS, unwanted fire alarm signals. There were 156 unwanted fire alarm signals during quarter 3. And Stephen gave you a good overview of the strategy that the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service is currently undertaking. But just to reinforce what we currently do at these incidents, we are always engaging with the duty holders, the managers, the persons responsible at these businesses to try and reduce these occurrences happening. If we are having reduced occurrences at specific incidents or locations, we do engage with our fire and safety enforcement team, who will again engage with them directly. Lastly, primary and secondary fires. Both primary and secondary fires are low numbers, considering this period was through bonfire, the bonfire period, and again the numbers are favourable. Again, there was a rise in secondary fire statistics due to the high numbers experienced in quarter 1. Moving on to the back end of your pack with regards to community safety activities. You'll be aware that the law changed regarding smoke detection that came into force in the 1st of February. During quarter 3, the Scottish Government did a lot of communication, which resulted in a lot of queries and inquiries coming into the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service locally. We have engaged with as many groups as we have done up to this period to try and allow people to understand what their requirements are and their responsibilities with regard to this law change. And this advice still continues today. We're still getting a lot of inquiries with regards to this. Bonfire awareness, as a reflection on the secondary fires, it was very much a collaborative approach with Police Scotland and our community wardens, engaging with the high schools within the area, and that's given us favourable results. As always, we generally see low numbers during this time, and I think it's due to the engagement that we carry out every year with regards to this. We also assisted Police Scotland with their Project Edward campaign, the road safety campaign that was run in Aberfeldy and Pitlochry. So we had very good results from that and good attendance at both events. Notable incidents, one of them that's caused a lot of press interest was the flooding in Blairgowrie. Our Blairgowrie Fire Station Watch Commander Paul Smith has been engaging directly with the Blairgowrie and Rattray Community Council. He's also been supporting the local resilience group, and we've also donated 500 flood sacks to their newly located store, which moved from the fire station in Blairgowrie up to the Rattray Community Hall, which is just adjacent where we had the issues with the flooding. And lastly, you'll see a couple of notable incidents with regards to some of the car fires. We had quite a timely attendance at Crieff Hydro, where they lost quite a part of their staff accommodation. And we've got, just to give an indication of the work carried out, we've got images of the RTC that was on the A94 between Cooperangus and Meagle. Just demonstrates the type of work we're encountering when we're attending these RTCs. So that gives us overall a summary of the report, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much, Ewan. I'll now open it up for questions. If anybody has a question on this report, could they please put a Q in the chat? Councillor McCall.
Good morning, everyone. Vice Convener. I have more than one question, if I may, since there's none other in the chat. If you maybe could indulge me in that, it'd be quite helpful.
Certainly will.
Thank you. So thank you for your report. It's been very comprehensive and helpful. One of the questions I have is on page 18 of your report, which is about the quarterly training commitment to operational firefighters. I'm really curious to know if all of your firefighters are trained in all of the services that can be offered from Perth Fire Station, particularly in terms of water rescue and in the more complex areas around rescue where people have to use ropes and lifts and various other types of things. I see Ewan Baird nodding there. I know that this is an issue I've perhaps raised before, because Perth Fire Station used to have quite a wide range of training, and I was a bit concerned that some of that wasn't being put in place for all firefighters, so there's only some fires trained in some things and some trained in others. And I think that's part of the national training programme within the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. But I think it's really important for Perth, as you know, such a large fire station, that for us to know whether or not every single firefighter there or every single member of your staff on the front line is trained in all of the services that are available to Perth. So that's my main substantive question. My other questions is around, just lost my track here a little bit, the Don't Drink and Drown national campaign. I'm just curious to know how many, I know we always have incidents of drowning in Perth, sadly, particularly in the summer on the River Tay, and I'm curious to know whether or not any of those drowning incidents are related to people who have had taken substances such as alcohol or other substances. So it'd be interesting to know that. And finally, and the community safety team, really interested to see that you were the Enable Employability Group. You met with them to assist young adults with learning disabilities with interview techniques, and I'm curious to know whether or not in the Fire and Rescue Service locally, what your percentage of your employees have disabilities, and specifically if there are any with learning disabilities, and if not, if you have any plans to put in provision to employ people with disabilities in your operation. Thank you. And thank you, Vice Convener, for allowing me to ask all these questions.
Thank you. Hopefully you has got a note of them all.
I can always repeat them.
Thank you, Councillor, for these questions. Firstly, with the training of firefighters, some of the disciplines that you mentioned there regarding line rescue and water rescue are very comprehensive, and it would be, we need to make sure that firefighters these competencies are kept to the highest level, so that when we respond to these incidents, we know that these firefighters are trained in the disciplines that we require them to do. We have got, there is a level of line rescue and there's a level of water rescue. We don't combine them so much together, but we also make sure that we communicate to our control rooms what resources we have available on the day. Now, just for a bit of awareness, if there was a water rescue within the River Tay at Perth would not be responding in isolation. We would be getting backup from Dundee, because we need these numbers. We need these trained specific to that discipline. So not all firefighters are trained to the highest level in every discipline, because we have to maintain these competencies and along with our core competencies. So it would be quite dismissive of us to expect everybody to maintain that standard all the time. But we do have these trained teams that are available to deploy at any time, and we do get backup not only from Dundee but from surrounding specialist stations within Scotland if required. Does that answer this question, Councillor?
Not really, no, really no. And I know I've raised it some time before, and their concern was raised with me by that the competencies within Perth Fire Station in particular were not being maintained universally across all of the staff. I understand about the disparity, that you need competencies in other places as well, but my worry is that the competencies in Perth Station are perhaps being downgraded, isn't quite the right word, but perhaps been reduced because of the need to have these competencies elsewhere, even though all the kit and all the capability and everything else was always here. So I really wanted reassurance that there wasn't any reduction of the number of staff that had the competencies in Perth Station in favour of, I suppose, the competencies being done somewhere else. I would rather see that the full competencies were maintained in Perth, as well as competencies being increased elsewhere.
Councillor McCall, if I could just maybe give you some reassurance there. We do maintain a minimum number in order for us to deliver the specialist resource. So if we're looking at water rescue, there is a minimum number that we have to maintain an effective response, and we ensure that that's maintained. We've got all our staff currently going through training in water rescue, just as their 3-yearly update, so we don't drop below the minimum numbers. We do, not all staff can undertake all specialisms, just the amount of training involved. We have specialist height operators, there's heavy rescue equipment, there's a number of different specialisms, but Perth is a declared water rescue station, and we maintain the minimum number required to run that team. So there's not been a downgrade there. There has been a change over a number of years where there was a different sort of provision where you would combine a line capability with a water capability, but the complexities of maintaining both of those specialisms, it becomes quite onerous in terms of training. So we separate those out, and the two teams work hand in hand. Perth, obviously, with the surrounding geography, water rescue is the key aspect. If they need the line rescue capability, we have a level in Perth, but we're backed up from surrounding stations who have they have that real expertise, because the type of instance that we go to, it now requires a real level of expertise, particularly if you're looking at water rescue, line rescue. They're high risk, and we can't really be jack of all trades with these sort of specialisms. So Perth will maintain, it does maintain its water rescue as well as all its normal firefighting. The line rescue, I think, is maybe what you're referring to, and it's changed slightly where other stations have a real specialism in that, and it's based on a risk assessment of historic incidents and property risk, the type of incidents that we're faced with, and it's spread across the country in that nature. But I wouldn't say Perth has been downgraded, certainly in terms of the water rescue. The skills we continue to build on them, and continue to adapt to the latest technologies and equipment that we've got. So hopefully that gives you some comfort around the training element.
It does give me comfort around the water rescue. I was concerned about the line rescue, and you've kind of confirmed some of my concerns, because sometimes in Perth and Kinross, as you will, I don't need to tell you this, very often line rescue and water rescue go hand in hand, depending on where someone needs to be rescued from. But nevertheless, you've provided a comprehensive answer, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Barrett, Peter Barrett.
I had two other questions.
Yeah, I'll come back to you, Sheila.
Thanks, Vice Convener. Indicator H8 fatal road traffic collisions and casualties is running at 4 for the year and 2 for the quarter. There is reference to Project Edward, every day without a road death. I just wondered if we could hear more about, the activities and aspects of that programme, and how we're seeking to reduce the number of fatal road traffic collisions through that.
Thank you for your question. The Project Edward was a police-led initiative that we worked in collaboration with. Another initiative that you may be aware of is the new driver scheme. This has been evaluated by Police Scotland, and as I believe it's getting discussed heavily within the Tayside Road Safety Forum, with it getting released this year. Maybe Police Scotland would have greater details on it. Essentially, it's looking at engagement with over 16s, young drivers predominantly. So essentially, you're maybe looking at a replacement to Safe Drive Stay Alive. So that's another initiative that's currently ongoing. The Project Edward that we ran up at Pitlochry in Aberfeldy, that was heavily focused on elderly drivers, particularly with getting back driving after the COVID restrictions. So we would absolutely support Project Edward getting rolled out to any other areas within Perth and Kinross, should that be the case.
If I could just add to that as well, the new driver scheme, I think it's an interesting approach we've taken locally. It's Police Scotland led and evaluated, and it runs across other parts of the country. I think what we've been able to do locally is we've been able to come on board. Police Scotland are happy for us to support that. So I think having the multi-agency approach is, adds strength to what is already a very good initiative. And what it does, it focuses, as it says in the title, on the new drivers. So previously there was a risk through Safe Drive Stay Alive that early school leavers that were out into the workplace were perhaps missed through our previous initiative. This has a much more focus on those that are likely to be driving early. So we're at the early stages of coming on board with Police Scotland on that one, but we're looking to roll that out as soon as possible and give that comprehensive coverage for road safety education and support the great work that Police Scotland are doing in it.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions there. Councillor McCall, you have another question?
I did indeed, and I did ask them already, but I shall do them again. My second question was about the Don't Drink and Drown national campaign. And as we sadly do have drowning incidents in Perth and Kinross over the summer, mostly I think in the River Tay, I'm just wondering, have any of those incidents were as a result of either alcohol or other substance abuse? Basically, what's the local stats on this is what I'm looking for.
Thank you for your question, and it's quite an interesting question, and I did have that conversation last month with Graham Binning. We don't actually, as a fire and rescue service, collect that level of information because we are not trained to determine that information and add it to our statistics. So doesn't form part of our KPIs. I'm not sure Police Scotland does at any level, but certainly the Fire and Rescue Service wouldn't collect that level of detail because we would maybe need it from a medical professional at the scene before we could even add it to any of our logs.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious. And my final question, if I may, Vice Convener.
Yeah.
It was really the question on the work with the community safety team had undertaken with the Enable Employability Group for adults with learning disabilities, and I was curious to know what percentage of the fire and rescue staff were disabled, and if there are any provisions in place to make to enable, I suppose, to use that pun, people with either physical or sensory or learning disabilities to gain employment, perhaps not in the front line, but to gain employment with the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service locally.
Yeah, again, thank you, Councillor, for your question. I don't have any of that information that's at hand at the moment, but I could certainly get that to you. I don't know if Stephen Wood would be able to give you a summary of where we are in that in relation to that.
Yeah, thank you, Ewan. Yeah, as Ewan says, I don't have those statistics to hand, but the fire service, like any public body, are extremely keen to be reflective of the communities that we serve. There's a number of initiatives, across a broad spectrum to try and make that happen. So we could certainly get you the figures, but I don't have them to hand today.
That's okay. I'd be curious to know, as many of my councillor colleagues here will know, I have a family member with a learning disability who has been through all these interview techniques and can do so very well, but very often employers are not in a position to actually offer any employment for a variety of reasons. So I'm always curious to know just what those are. So yes, if that would be helpful, Stephen, I'll happily speak to you after this, or get the information that you can offer after this for my own information, if nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Vice Convener, for your indulgence.
Okay. I don't see any more questions in the chat. There's been a bit of time before the last one was there, so I'm going to open up for any comments on the report. I don't see any comments coming in. Councillor Shires.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Just to be very parochial for a moment, and to thank Paul Smith and the team at Blairgowrie Fire Station for the work that they've been doing in the community. I think it's a really good example of when a public agency can see a problem, work with the community to find a solution, deliver that solution, and then look to build on it for the future. So thank you very much. I hope it's a model that we can see rolled out in other communities, because I think just that peace of mind that it will have given people, but also the driving them forward to take practical steps themselves, is really encouraging. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I don't see any more comments in the chat, so I'm just going to finish off myself with some thanks. And I'd like to thank you, Stephen and Ewan and Billy McClintock, your predecessor in your leadership, and your staff that they have done, and the help they've given the communities right across Perth and Kinross, sometimes in very harrowing circumstances. It's not an easy job that you do, but it's a vital one that supports our communities. I'd also like to thank you. I think it's an excellent show of partnership working. Members of the public that are watching probably don't realise just how much work we do together, not just in this committee, but in smaller committees and the partnership meetings we have. So I'd like to thank you very much. And those partnership meetings also include the police, which will be coming on next. So on behalf of the residents of Perth and Kinross, and I hope all the members of this committee, thank you very much for the work you've done for us and for the reporting you've done to us for the last 5 years. Thank you. I'd now like to, are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
I don't see anybody saying no. In which case we'll move on to item 5, which is the police report. And I'd like to ask Chief Superintendent Phil Davison and Chief Inspector Graham Binney to introduce the report, and also Chief Inspector Tom Leonard, who has taken over from Graham, as we've heard, for his promotion, and we'll hear a little bit from Tom as well. So over to you, Phil.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and good morning, everybody. Good to see you all again. As indicated, I am joined by Graham Binney, and I guess just from a personal perspective, I'd like to both congratulate Graham on his promotion, recent promotion to our Tayside-wide partnerships portfolio role, one in which Graham will still have some active involvement from that perspective into the Perth and Kinross area, and also to thank him for his efforts in serving the communities of Perth and Kinross over the past few years. And as you've indicated as well, Chief Inspector Tom Leonard is on the line, a vastly experienced officer who's served in Perth and Kinross before, is local to the area, and more recently has been a detective chief inspector looking at or in charge of public protection across the wider Tayside area. So Tom brings a wealth of experience into this role, and I know that he will serve our Perth and Kinross communities really well going forward. Tom's here in an observing capacity today, and it will certainly become you know, a key member for future meetings. In terms of the policing report today, I trust that members have had the opportunity to read the report, and on which I would not intend to go over the full submission. It clearly has significant detail within it, and I know that members will have had the chance to digest that. The report, as always, provides performance update and contextual information against the local policing plan, but also shows linkages into the national policing objectives, as well as supporting the Perth and Kinross community plan. And this report that we are presenting today covers Q3, which is the period 1st of October to the 31st of December. However, it does focus on the year-to-date data from the 1st of April to the 31st of December and against the comparable 1st of April to 31st of December from 2020, as well as some 5-year average data. As I updated at the last quarter, I would again advise members that the impact of the coronavirus pandemic continues to make year-on-year comparisons really challenging, and that's due to the varying levels of restrictions that have been in place at the different times over the period. And for this quarter in question, whilst Q3 had a return of some restrictions in December because of the Omicron variant, the vast majority of the period was without restriction through the sort of October-November periods, but that also coincided with an extremely busy period for policing and emergency services, with COP26, with the multi-agency responses to Bonfire Night and the multi-agency responses to Storm Arwen. In the most part, the quarter saw policing responses that were much more aligned to the pre-pandemic levels, with the exception of that Omicron variance into December, where we undoubtedly saw further increased road usage, increased social interaction, and the wider licensed trade and commercial local events activities fully in place, which has led to some increased associated offences, as you'll see in the report. In terms of a brief summary of the sort of the key information from the performance report, I will pass to Graham Binney to just draw out a few points from the report, and then, as always, more than happy between us to take questions from members. Thank you. Graham.
Thank you. Good morning to all, and thank you to Mr. Davison for the introduction. As the convener and vice convener have said, it's my last meeting, and I really would like to extend my thanks to all members of the committee for your continued support for the delivery of policing and support to the community in Perth and Kinross. I look forward to my new role, but I have to, give credit to all in this meeting for the passion that's shown for partnership at work in Perth and Kinross, and the can-do attitude to solving some of the problems which we've faced in the last 2 years. So I would like to just extend my thanks to all for your help over the last 2 years, and pass my best wishes on to Tom. As you've heard, he's got a broad experience in various roles and will continue to be a safe pair of hands for Perth and Kinross moving forward. As Mr. Davison says, some of the key messages in terms of the performance, we've seen a reduction in serious assaults and assaults on emergency workers. However, there's been a slight increase in common assaults and robbery over the Q3 period. I am pleased to see the reduction in serious assaults and particularly a reduction in emergency service workers, as the impact of these assaults on victims is often unnoticed and can be quite significant. Obviously this has to be balanced against our increase in common assaults, where alcohol and drugs continue to be quite a significant factor. Domestic abuse continues to account for about 30% of our recorded violent crime, and we see, as I've referenced before, a gradual increase in young men involved in violence. It has been something of a passion of mine, and whilst we've been able to push resource into that primary prevention area, both with police and resources, their youth engagement team, working with YMCA to deal with some of the problems, that secondary prevention and finding out the reasons for behaviours such as this are proving a lot more difficult than I had perhaps hoped. So I give assurance to the committee that that's something that has already been discussed at various strategic forums. The trick is now to kind of do some analysis to figure out what our needs assessment is for where we need to push the scarce resources that we have, and that's something that I probably will intend to take on in my new role and have a look at the impact on our young people over the last 2 years across Tayside, and try and pick out some of the good practices going on in Perth and Kinross, but not only but wider, to see if there's anything that we can do to help young people whose well-being suffered over the last 2 years. In terms of acquisitive crime, we've seen a continuation of the pattern which was reported in Q2, with a reduction in a crime where less well-defended targets were subject to criminality, and I mean by that sheds and motor vehicles and shoplifting, and shift towards an increase in break-ins to houses. The shoplifting picture is pleasing to see, work with criminal justice partners and retail premises in targeting irregular offenders. And whilst the house break-ins to primarily rural areas in Perth and Kinross have risen, we have and are continuing to do a lot of good work with neighbouring policing divisions, particularly Fife and Forth Valley, to target criminals that we know are operating and moving into the area to commit crime. Fraud continues to be high and above comparative figures from this period last year, which is consistent with the national position and the move of criminals continuing to use the cyberspace to commit crime during the lockdown. And this is a complex area. We continue to do local investigations, but also involve support officers from those specialist areas in terms of the cyber-enabled crime, and continue to work with partners to try and push some of the prevention messages, particularly those around those that are more vulnerable in the community. Road safety, as Ewan has alluded to, we had one tragic road fatality during the period on the M90 south of Perth, and I know the fire service referenced 2. I think that's probably a difference in recording. And Ewan alluded to the incident in Murthley that we particularly probably haven't classified as a fatality, so forgive me for the discrepancy in figures that one or two of the members might have picked up on there. We have seen an increase in serious injuries on our roads, but in contrast to that, there's been a reduction in drug driving compared to the same period last year. It's assessed that the reduction in the COVID restrictions has undoubtedly seen increased road use, and there's been a focus on road safety and campaign activity during Q3, particularly around the festive period, which has probably resulted in an increase in speeding detections. And the higher speeding figures referenced in the report continue to be around the main routes around Perth, such as the A9, the A90 and M90. As we've seen before, recorded sexual crime has risen during this quarter, with 14 more crimes than in the equivalent period last year. That's consistent with national positions and is driven by continued reporting of historical abuse and cyber-enabled offences. Also, the rise in crimes also includes the positive work by our officers to proactively investigate perpetrators and discover additional crimes committed against other victims. and this continues to be an area of priority for us in working closely with our partners to encourage victims to come forward and report, to work preventatively and to continue to support victims of crime. We continue to focus on the dangers from drugs, and proactive work has resulted in a 9% increase on supply cases from the previous year. And as Mr Davison touched on, we experienced increased demand from return of public events, and as per other reporting periods, we continue to experience significant demand from missing people and concern calls relating to people with vulnerabilities. This I reported briefly on this earlier on in the year, but this quarter saw the activation of our festive policing plans, which had some positive results in terms of our work with retail premises around shopliftings and more visibility on the roads from our roads policing colleagues. But sadly, these plans were curtailed by the onset of the Omicron variant towards the end of December. Pleasing to see, in November we opened a new police office in Crieff, co-located with partners there, and I think what Tom will be able to look forward to is quite an exciting period of estate's work to try and rejuvenate our police estate and work where we can with partners to provide more appropriate space, public sector spaces within Perth and Kinross. That's the summary of the relevant issues. Forgive me, I made a note to self and haven't covered it, which was asked a question separately about hate crime. There's a reference in my report which is potentially a little vague about Hate Crime Awareness Week. That will happen next week, and there will be more information coming out in the next couple of days. Unfortunately, the toolkit for the National Hate Crime Awareness Week has been delayed somewhat for reasons out with our control, as we would have liked to provide more detail at this meeting, but I'll make sure that that's shared with partners in the next couple of days, so that we can take advantage of any of the messaging and preventions advice that comes with that. So thank you very much to all. Thank you to Mr Davison, and happy to take any questions between us that you might have.
Thank you very much. If anybody's got a question, if they'd like to put a Q in the chat, I'm going to indulge and ask the first question. It's with regards to road safety. When we look at speeding, that's gone up. There's only 1,436 in the period 2021, and I think that's expected because, as you said, there was less vehicles on the road. And I just wonder what it was for the quarter before that, and whether the quarter we've got now is comparable to that quarter. And I also noticed that the drink and drug driving has gone down, and when you look back to the previous report from the fire, the road traffic incidents has also gone down in that quarter. So is it does it correlate that the drink driving, the reason that the accidents have gone down, is that because the drink driving has gone down, or is there a mixture? I mean, I suppose the question is drink driving or speeding the cause of many of the accidents and road traffic collisions we have?
Thanks for that.
Sorry, sorry, Mr Davison.
No, bash on, Graham, if you were either of us can respond to that.
You've highlighted an anomaly, Vice Convener, that is an interesting one, and I don't quite have the answer for, because, as you say, the speeding figures have gone up. We probably would have expected that, given we've got Q3 provides opportunities for campaign activity. We have speeding camera partnerships back on the road, so those numbers have gone up. The slight anomaly, as you said, which will require us a little bit more analysis, is why the drug driving figures have gone down. It could be as a result of campaign activity. It could just be something that it has been is just by chance. So I don't know what I could do. I'm quite happy to, myself or Tom, have a little bit of a look at that and come back to you separately, because it is a strange one that I don't quite have the full answer for as yet, and it might just be something that's one of these unpredictabilities that bears no resemblance to previous trends.
Thank you. We have a number of questions now. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Vice Convener, and thank you to Police Scotland for the report. My question is in relation to the public protection section of your report. I think it's on page 26 and 7 of your report, and specifically in relation to sexual crimes and domestic abuse crimes. I think, and what's prompted this really to some extent is the convener telling us at the beginning it's 2 years since the start of lockdown, and I do remember when we got reports shortly after that there was quite a marked increase in these types of crimes, probably as a result of people being in a lockdown situation. So I'm just curious to know what is the trend since some of the restrictions have been eased, and has the situation improved for the people who had been the victims of such crimes. But I also as well want to congratulate Police Scotland specifically on their Don't Be That Guy campaign, which I thought was fantastic. It really resonated very well. And I'd be curious to know if they're going to follow up with that, because I think at the time it was very effective. But the thing that leads me on from that particular campaign is I also recall when I first came onto this committee that there was quite a big piece of work that was done with Police Scotland on an ongoing basis with schools in terms of consent and appropriate behaviour and all of those sorts of things to try and help young people understand what is appropriate behaviour. And with the lockdown situation the situation we've been in over the past 2 years, there obviously has been limited opportunity to do that. So I'm just curious to know how that can be picked up again, or what has been going on in the meantime. Anyway, that's the main question here. Thank you, Vice Convener.
I'm quite happy to take that, Mr. Davison. Thanks, Councillor McCall, for the question. The first one, I think it was about trends. Now, forgive me, Tom might have something interesting to add to this, given he was the divisional lead for this up until this week. What we have seen is quite rightly a lot of information from third sector and advocacy services about people coming to looking for help to respond to domestic abuse situations. Certainly in the last year we haven't seen a notable increase in reported criminality or a significant increase in reported incidents to the police. That is somewhat levelled out. Now obviously the work will focus on is there people out there who feel unable or cannot access the help from police or from other agencies. So that probably is part of our work to figure out why from a policing perspective and reported crime perspective that rise doesn't correlate necessarily with what our advocacy services are telling us. Thank you, and I agree with you about the Don't Be That Guy campaign. I think with all campaigns some are more successful than others, so I think it would be the wrong thing to do for Police Scotland not to realise how successful that has been and utilise that as a stepping stone for other campaigns. So that's something that would be part of my new job, and like you, I was really supportive and positive about that. So that's one of the things we will take away. Your question about consent in schools kind of links to my earlier point about young people. I think we've seen 2 years where we haven't been able to go into schools and speak to young people, and I'm not always a fan of the police doing that work. It's the most appropriate person. However, I think one of the pieces of work we need to do is now that the opportunity to speak to young people are opening again, is we need to figure out what is most effective, and some of that work on consent may indeed be the right thing to do, because there will be an appetite to go back and speak to young people in schools about all sorts of different areas of concern. The trick for me is to figure out what the priority is, and that's where we need to divert our resources as the COVID restrictions start to ease in the next 6 months, and that will also be part of my new job, and will be a link to my previous comment about violence that we're seeing increasing amongst young men. Tom, is there anything you want to add from your experience?
No, Graham, I think just echo your comments in terms of the trends. We obviously work very, very closely with partners, and we actually work with Women's Aid and Barnardo's on a daily basis. So a lot of engagement to make sure that people who are the victims of sexual assaults and domestic violence do have a route to report to the police. and obviously the report reflects as well some of the proactivity that our investigative teams do. So when we have a report from a victim, one of our standard investigative practices is to research that perpetrator and identify any other potential victims and encourage them to report. So all of that work is ongoing on a regular basis. In terms of the campaigns, the That Guy campaign, again, would echo Graham's comments, a hugely positive campaign which appears to have been very well received. So it would be good to see that being relaunched again, and I've no doubt that that will be the case. And it follows on from some work we did with the bystander campaign as well, in respect to some of our licensed premises and public spaces, just to try and raise awareness in terms of prevention.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. I just want to, I should have perhaps said when I was asking the question, the reason that the Don't Be That Guy campaign was of interest in relation to schools is because a lot of my younger relatives and you know, children of friends who are at school age and just it resonated with them particularly. So I just think there's maybe something, a hook there that perhaps, you know, could be built upon once you are able to go back into the schools. So anyway, thank you both. Good luck on your new job, Mr. Binney.
If I could just pitch in on the back of that, Councillor McCall, and on the back of what my colleagues have said, that from the national perspective, the intention is to certainly keep the foot on the pedal, so to speak, in terms of campaign activity. And it's not just the Don't Be That Guy. During the reporting period we're discussing today, there was the White Ribbon campaign, there was the domestic abuse campaign around about the benefits of the disclosure scheme for domestic abuse. And I think it's about the range of campaigns that we were able to get out to continue to raise awareness, and I think that is reflected in the confidence of people to come forward. The vast majority of sexual offences still fall into the category of what we call non-recent, which I think is helpful. And the greater we can raise awareness and increase that confidence through that partnership approach to report, then all the better, and certainly looking to try and change societal behaviours as well. So just that wider assurance that there will be more campaigns coming.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Vice Convener. I wanted to refer to page 8 of the police report, page 47 of the pack, and regarding common assaults and violence by young males, particularly in the city centre. It was an issue I raised at the last committee meeting, and I'm grateful for Chief Inspector Binney's comments that he's still going to keep his foot on this particular ball, and how we tackle the issue. I did say last time round, and I think the committee agreed, that we needed a deeper dive into this to find out the reasons and drivers behind it. So I'm keen to find out what's happened in between the last committee and this committee to take that forward. I'm aware that the Perth Community Investment Fund is investing in 3 city centre youth clubs, working in conjunction with the YMCA. So I'm also very keen that all the strands are pulled together, both through education and children's services, community safety, plus the police and fire and rescue and health services. As I said, it talked about a deeper dive by this committee. It may be much more appropriate to broaden that out and have a separate event or events that involve other partners. So I'd be grateful for some comment on that, but also what's happened in the meantime.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll bring Graham Binney in just a second. I know he responded to you off table, but appropriate that he probably brings in and touches on some of that response to you. Undoubtedly, assault covers a number of factors and aspects. There's the domestic elements within it. There is the public space element, private space elements within it. And then when we look at clearly the offenders and the backdrop to it, there are a number of factors such as drugs and alcohol that are often an impact in terms of why assaults occur, but equally, and as has been mentioned there in the previous report and in previous commentary, an increasing trend that we've noticed around about young people. So it is absolutely an area of focus. You've got that assurance from me as the divisional commander that Graham, as he's indicated, moving into his new role, will have that as a part of his focus in that portfolio to look not just within Perth and Ross, but across the wider space, because we've got an obligation to to try and focus in on our youth, to educate to the dangers and the life choices, with a view to not only reducing common assaults occurring, but it's around about setting them up for the best opportunities in life. So there's a key feature in that is partnership working, and there has been a bit of activity since the last meeting. I'll pass on to Graham just to maybe summarise some of that for you.
No, thank you very much. No, Councillor Barrett's absolutely right, and has mentioned some of the work that's been ongoing, from the YMCA work to the youth engagement team, the extension of funding for that team, who have been hugely helpful in working in partnership with the police and other community safety officers. It's probably worth, not that I want to probably the perspective is that some of that violence, particularly boys in the teenage years, is around a small number of individuals. The Criminal Justice and Safety Partnership have obviously discussed the vision for criminal justice in Scotland, and looking at how we deal with young people from a sort of prevention and intervention perspective, rather than traditional community justice pathways. So we are actively, obviously not for this meeting, working with social work colleagues and other specialist areas in the police to understand those particular group of young males who have come to our attention very regularly, if there is any exploitative relationships going on there, and they're being pulled towards drugs and alcohol, and that is the driver behind some of this violence. So that direct interventions into some young people has been somewhat the priority for what is now Tom's team. I think probably from my perspective, the longer term understanding of the issues behind it has not been as simple to fix as I maybe would have hoped, and certainly with the scope of a reporting cycle for this committee. So I suppose it's just my hands up to say perhaps we might have had more clarity on who is best to deal with this matter, because I think there are aspects of young people's well-being and responsibilities of criminal justice partnerships, to strategic young people's strategic, children, young families strategy groups. CPP obviously has a responsibility for the well-being of young people, and I think, but I have spoken to Hazel Robertson and Jackie Pepper about this, and trying to get that, as you say, a deeper dive, but a more meaningful analysis of what the problem actually is, so we can start to determine whether any of these groups, or indeed some sort of bespoke group, is best to drive this forward. Because I will hark back to the fact there are a lot of people doing a lot of good things. It's just to make sure that we're prioritising the right and the most successful pieces of activity. So I put my hands up in terms of it's not been as easy. The secondary prevention elements have not been as easy to get handled as I maybe would have hoped. That's absolutely right. It's hit the nail on the head that needs to be an area of work we need to keep pushing into.
Thanks, Graham. It clearly is an area that we need to keep on top of, or keep pushing. And I don't underestimate that how difficult it is. None of this is easy, but we're about to enter a period of considerable change, and I think it is just important that that there isn't a kind of 6-month hiatus on this. As the council changes and changes are made elsewhere. So,
thank you. Barbara Renton would like to come in as well.
Thank you, Vice Convener. Sort of as Graham's touched on, there are regular strategic meetings to coordinate amongst partners, response based on local need. And this is attended by community safety colleagues, Police Scotland, education, youth services and social work, along with our key third sector partners as well. But I think that it would be helpful, based on the the discussion this morning and the previous committee, that we bring a joint report on youth offending to a future committee.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Vice Convener. My questions are really on road safety, but just as a sort of follow-up comment to the last discussion and Director Renton's a helpful suggestion there, which I would support. Obviously, we spoke some months ago about the potential for displacement activity, particularly from displacement of antisocial behaviour activity, particularly from Perth and Kinross, from Perth City Centre out to Scone, and I think Crieff was also mentioned. So just to alert that those incidents in Scone are ongoing. I think they're reported to police and community safety regularly by the community as they happen, but obviously that's a reactive step, and I think proactive steps would be helpful in that regard. But returning to my question, and just following up on your question, Vice Convener, about the or your comment about the concerning increase in speeding that's happened in Perth and Kinross over the period, and I note that the not only have recorded speeding offences increased, but in actual fact the speeding offences rate per 10,000 of population is higher in Perth and Kinross than the other divisions, but also substantially higher than the actual average for the whole of Scotland. So that is definitely a concern. Asked previously, I'm not seeing this information pulled out in the report, but do we know how many detections there are in the 20-mile-an-hour limits?
Vice Convener, can I take that?
Yep.
The answer is not that many, because the standard response from the police is to not routinely enforce those 20-mile-an-hour limits. We will do when there's additional vulnerabilities, and that's the national picture that Police Scotland and Road Safety Partners have adopted. We have done particular pieces of work in response to community concerns about increased speeding in 20 miles an hour areas, but not seen the level of speeds that would require further work. It is the case that most of those speeding cases are from areas which are prioritised because of killed and serious injured data. So that's where our road safety van will be located, where our roads policing colleagues will be located, and it is, and those locations are identified because that's where we predominantly have more serious injuries and deaths on the roads, and that's where a lot of the detections will come from.
Okay, so just to reflect on that, or follow up on that, then. Obviously, you have your databases where the serious incidents, the fatalities and the casualties have happened. That used to happen a lot on for example, A90, and action was taken by putting in the flyovers, which I think has reduced that. But on our small rural roads, I think it's really difficult to use that historical data to predict where the next accident is going to be, and it is really a question of listening to or I wonder if you would agree that it's a question of listening to the community concerns, because those are the people that see the not necessarily near misses, although it can be, which again wouldn't necessarily feature in your database of statistics, but that they are seeing where the risk is of a potential incident, and that those areas are maybe not getting, because of the mechanism that you're using, the roads policing unit is using to actually determine where to to set up enforcement activity, it's not necessarily reflective of where communities are identifying the potential risks are.
If I could maybe come in on that, Councillor Stewart. So I guess first of all, back to your original part of the question around about the rate of increase. I think that this report covers a period from the 1st of April and throughout the summer period, where I think it's right to acknowledge that because of restrictions in travel abroad, that Scotland experienced significantly more visitors to its rural communities in particular. And what we do know is that Perth and Kinross, being as clearly attractive as it is as a tourist destination, but also a route of access into the Upper Highlands, did experience a significant increase in road traffic usage in the area. So corresponding to that is clearly a need from all agencies and services to make sure that we put safety provisions and measures in place to try and, I guess, moving along the lines of enforcement of education and engineering. It's that approach that we look to deploy. In terms of where we deploy our mechanisms, I would give you that assurance that whilst we use statistical data that comes from road traffic accidents, the statistical data also comes from where offences and crimes have occurred. So where you start to see increases in speed, then clearly we would want to continue to focus to try and have an impact in those areas. But we also want to and do listen to our local communities. And what will happen from that is often a graduated response and approach. So where there is those repeated concerns from a community, we may look at the introduction of speed measurement devices in the first instance, which then affords us that bit of data as to the actual levels of speeds that are deploying, and actually can be a reasonable deterrent in themselves in terms of an indicator in rural communities as vehicles are coming through them and start to see reduced and changed behaviours. So and certainly where we clearly see accidents combined with community voice, then that does lead to not just roads policing officer activity, but our local police officers, local community officers deploying with local speed detection equipment and otherwise. So I trust that gives just that bit of assurance that we do respond and listen to, and I would actually encourage our communities to continue to report into their local police where they've got those concerns and clearly perceptions around about speed. It's something we treat seriously, and I think that's fairly well evidenced through the increase in speed and detections and activity through the campaigns that we've got in the Perth and Kinross area. We want to reduce road casualties. We want to ensure our roads are safe. Okay.
And just, you know, when you're saying that you take the community concerns in, a couple of concerns that have been raised with me by local communities involve, for example, people trying to phone up and report speeding vehicles, you know, really excessive speeding vehicles. Now, I don't know if this is true or not, but I was told that if they phone up and try and report that, if the vehicle's no longer in the area, then that doesn't get logged as an incident. So I'm wondering how that build-up of community information actually translates into the, you know, the algorithm that you were talking about for deciding where the enforcement is. And then another concern that's been raised is just the complexity of, so I've got a community that does have community speed watch, but the complexity around that, you know, in terms of getting people approved and trained and the procedures that they have to follow, it seems to be very onerous. And
Councillor Stewart, you've been quite lenient on a number of questions. You could answer a quick question because we have other people in the chat wanting a question.
Sorry. Yeah, so that's it. It was just to flag up those two concerns about the logging of issues and the complexity of the speed watch.
Yeah, so very quick answers to that then, conscious of the Vice Convener's comments there. So any call into the police is clearly logged as a call into the police, whether that translates into what we call an incident is a different scenario. But either way, it's logged, and there's a categorization and a heading that is applied to that on our command and control system. So all of those contacts become searchable, and we're able to use that data. What I would clearly encourage communities though is to continue to also report concerns through conventional methods, through their local community groups, into the local community officers, through their elected members and officials, and that affords that intelligence and positioning to come forward to us. It's just that assurance. We will listen. We do listen, and I think that's represented with where we deploy, the speed detections and activities we go on, and additionally what work we do with partners where there's real concerns in some of the local communities, looking at engineering solutions as well. How can the roads be altered? In terms of the community speed watch thing, I appreciate that there's challenges in getting people through that and trained quickly. However, that very much falls under the health and safety at work sort of obligations, where you're putting people essentially on a roadway and vehicles passing at speed. There is obligations, as I'm sure you would appreciate, to ensure that there's a really high level of training that's afforded to make sure that we don't place people at risk. And there's also clearly, ensuring that there's a link into our local officers in all instances that's ongoing to afford that additional layer of protection over the top of that as well. So I certainly will take a note of that and see if there's any means in which we can look at speeding up the process, but that there's reasons for that, for why there is a timescale to it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Vice Convener, thanks for your indulgence.
Convener, you have a question. Yeah,
very quick question, thank you. Just following on the question of speeding, because this is one of the two big complaints I always get, particularly speeding through these 20-mile-an-hour limits. Several people point out to me that in England now they're using portable cameras. These are self-contained cameras, pick up speed and number plate recognition, and they're literally just bolted to a post, something along the lines of, for example, a vehicle activated sign post, and it's bolted on, presumably calibrated, left there for a period of time, and then moved on to the next place. But because it's self-contained, it's totally portable. And I just wonder if you've come across this at all. If you have, is it something that could be utilised in Scotland, not just obviously in Perth and Kinross, but across Scotland as a way of picking up these dangerous speeders, and they are dangerous, particularly through these 20-mile-an-hour limits, to pick them up and prosecute them.
Thanks, Convener. I have heard of the devices, and certainly there's a range of technologies out there that are constantly popping up, and some really good examples of pilots being undertaken across the UK. Our National Roads Policing Department keep a tab on all of these, and clearly some of them are driven and utilised by policing, but others are then looked at and explored on a local authority level as well. So in terms of whether we've explored the use of portable cameras for Tayside, I don't know the specific answer to that, but aware certainly that the benefits of new technologies are considered across the piece. I just don't have the specific answer to it, but I can certainly go and take that to our roads policing colleagues and try and find out for you.
Fine, thank you very much. Thanks, Vice Convener.
Thank you. And we go to the last question before we go to comments, and that's from Councillor Jarvis.
And it's on speeding again. But I only have one question. Other people have mentioned this. I mean, I'm constantly getting complaints from people who say that vehicles are speeding, whether it's in 20-mile-an-hour limit or along some of our rural roads. And I wondered, do you have any figures that could either say, yes, it's a problem, or actually put a lie to it?
So thanks for the question, Councillor Jarvis. And I suppose in similar response to those given to Councillor Stewart, every time we get that data that's provided to us, we clearly want to assess that over a period of time and using the various measures and capabilities that we've got to do so. In terms of giving a specific answer on data, what would maybe help is if there's a specific community road or otherwise you've got in mind, and we can certainly go in and have a look at it. But I'm not able, I guess, to provide a specific answer to that latter part of your question.
Okay, well, I could give you a few roads where I do get a lot of complaints, and maybe you could provide the information.
yeah, certainly see what we can do for you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I see you've snuck a question in there, Councillor McCall, if it's a quick question.
It probably is. Thank you, Vice Convener. I'd wanted to wait and see if somebody else would raise the question first, and it's actually about something that's not in the report, and it's a little bit connected, I suppose, to my original question, and it's about human trafficking and exploitation. And I know that that used to be covered in the report, and very often it is linked to gender-based violence, etc. So I'm just curious to know why it's not in the report, and or it's maybe a timing thing, and whether or not there still is an issue with this particular aspect in Perth and Kinross. Thank you, and thank you, Vice Convener.
Thanks, Councillor. I'll bring Graham Binney in just a second for that bit of local context, but certainly serious and organised crime, human trafficking, links to county lines, and cuckooing is a significant issue across Scotland, and it's a one that our specialist crime division take the lead on, but with very close links into our local policing divisions. We work actively across partners to look to gain and glean intelligence on persons at risk, premises that may be operating in a sense for human trafficking or otherwise, and Perth and Kinross has within this last year had some successes in terms of detections around about that. That there's limited reference to it in this report is probably just reflective of the quarter under response that there's not, I guess, a headline return to throw back into the report. However, I would give that assurance that the serious nature of clearly serious and organised crime is absolutely high up there in terms of policing priorities, and is one that we are very much over in terms of a division and in Perth and Kinross. So Graham, I don't know if you've got any additional local context just in terms of that.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I would just reiterate what you said. As Councillor McCall suggests, human trafficking is always a constant threat to us. It's not represented in this report as a standalone item because I tend to look at these organised crime elements as one and report what was significant during that quarter, but we have had significant success in North Perthshire and South Perthshire looking at organised labour exploitation within the last year. We are conscious that people, particularly females, can be trafficked in and around Scotland for the purpose of sexual exploitation. That seems to be something that appears for a short period and then moves on. So we're very conscious that we gather intelligence about that. What I would hesitate, within the limitations of the report, I wouldn't like to put anything that is purely based on intelligence. Because we do receive intelligence, but obviously want to make sure that it is accurate before I can report into a public forum. But it is worth highlighting that there is an operation which is done regularly across Scotland, which we are very much a part of, and Tom's team has been involved in, which looks at human trafficking and different types of exploitation. So we continue to do work in the area to try and gather that intelligence, and we'll respond if we need to, both on a Perth and Kinross and a Pan-Tayside basis. But in answer to your original question, I didn't refer to anything in this particular quarter because I didn't think there was anything that was relevant in terms of enforcement or investigation at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor, just to pitch in, and I suppose it's an offer that our specialist crime division routinely will make themselves available to attend at scrutiny committees to be able to give a more topical overview on national issues such as serious organised crime in its different guises, cybercrime, the different elements that we clearly reach into. So if the committee wishes, I can certainly make arrangements for that more topical presentation to take place at a future meeting.
Thank you very much.
I'll leave that for the convener to answer that one. But thank you for your responses. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that'll be very useful in the future. Right, that's the end of the questions. I move on to comments, and there's a comment there from Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, convener. Two brief comments. Firstly was to express appreciation and thanks to Graham Binney for his leadership and commitment. You know, as our local area commander, I think we've worked very effectively together. I want to congratulate him on his promotion, and I'm pleased that he'll still be in touch and working in partnership with us. Second was just an offer from an equalities perspective. If there's anything that I can do to amplify or reinforce the messages of the hate crime campaign next week, or anything that the equalities team can do to demonstrate partnership working in that area, then please just ask.
Thank you. I see no other requests for comments, so I'd just like to finish off by saying thank you very much to Graham. I called him Chief Inspector, but I think he's probably Superintendent by now, for all he's done in the last 5 years, or however long it's been in that post. Also to welcome Chief Inspector Tom Leonard, and hopefully be able to work together in the future. And just to you and your staff in Tayside, thank you very much for all the work you do again for our communities. And you particularly have a struggle when national events come to the country, and you have to supply officers there, but you also have to maintain a presence in our community. So thank you very much. And thank you both to Police Scotland and the Fire and Rescue Service for their reports today, and thank you for the reporting you've both done to this committee in the last 5 years. And I will now hand back to the convener. Thank you.
Thanks, Vice Convener. So members will move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the regular update on the Community Planning Partnership. And I think Mr. Haxton is here to introduce the report. Yeah, over to you, Lee.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, thanks. This, as you say, this is the regular Community Planning Partnership update and covers the period from the last Housing and Communities Committee on 24th of January. The report is split into 4 main sections, and the key points can be summarised as follows. Under the Local Outcomes Improvement Plan, Committee will recall and understand that the LOIP is our shared Community Planning Partnership strategy for tackling inequalities, and is the unique Community Planning Partnership contribution to the offer. The review of the Local Outcomes Improvement Plan commenced in July of 2020. The board has previously agreed 5 strategic priorities which form the basis of the revised LOIP. And since January, partners have been focusing on identifying smart partnership actions that are necessary to deliver against those priorities. A final draft of the LOIP will be presented to CPP board at the next board meeting in April, and we hope to have a final amendments and sign off from the board in June, and thereafter we'll go to full council. The second item is on locality working. The board has previously agreed to focus on 2 specific localities, those being Cooper Angus and South Creef, and introduce some new ways of working to try and tackle local inequalities. The initial actions have been identified and they're included in the draft LOIP as part of that document, and a further sessions planned for next week, where the shared issues that are set out in the report will be investigated further and the next steps for the working group will be agreed. The third item is the annual performance report, and the Community Planning Partnership is required to produce one outlining the work that's taken place in the reporting period, and for the LOIP the reporting period is from October into September, so this one covers October 2020 to September 2021. As a result, it covers the period of the second national lockdown and the ongoing LOIP review that I've touched on. So the report covers that in the main, as well as a summary of the performance using previously agreed performance indicators from the original 5 objectives of the LOIP. So a finalised version will be presented to the board in April and will thereafter be on the Community Planning Partnership page on the website. The fourth item is climate change. A working group has been established and the first meeting is taking place on the 6th of April. The focus of that working group will initially be on ensuring that the LOIP and the actions within the LOIP reflect the potential impact of climate change on each of those strategic priorities. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. I'll open up to questions if we have any. I'm not seeing any coming through. There's no questions coming through. I'll ask if there's any comments. Nope, nothing coming through. Therefore, members, are we happy to note the report?
Noted.
Has been.
Noted.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lee, for the introduction. A nice light one for you today.
Thanks very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. So, members, we then move on to the last item on the agenda this morning, which relates to the Gypsy Traveller site transfer. And I'll ask Michelle to introduce.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, everyone. Members, the report before committee today seeks approval for the transfer of one of the council's Gypsy Traveller sites at Double Dykes in Perth from the general fund to the housing revenue account. It also notes the ongoing consultation and engagement which will take place with residents on Bobbin Mill over the coming weeks. Both Perth and Kinross Council and the Scottish Government have made firm commitments to supporting ongoing improvements for the lives of Gypsy travellers. The proposal in today's report would allow us to establish a solid financial platform and create a long-term plan for ongoing improvements. Residents will also see the benefit of additional rights as outlined in the paper, as they would also transfer to a Scottish secure tenancy agreement. Because the sites are currently separate from the wider HRA account, residents do not benefit from the wider pooling of rents and the ability, therefore, for us to deliver longer-term planned improvements such as planned maintenance and capital improvements. If approval to transfer the site to the HRA is agreed, any future works and capital spend can be made through the HRA capital or planned maintenance programme. There will be no changes to the structure or the type of services provided to residents. There will be an enhancement to the services provided in terms of a planned maintenance programme for both the chalets and the site, and an opportunity for residents to access the same level of support and assistance that is on offer to HRA tenants. In addition, a review of the rent structure would be undertaken to ensure there was alignment with the charges around other HRA tenants. And finally, it's worth noting that if the transfer of the site is approved today, this will still be subject to Scottish Minister's consent, and this will be sought if approval is given at today's committee. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. I'll open up now to questions. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. It's a proposal I fully support. Actually, my question is more a procedural one. So, paragraph 2.5 of the report describes how we'll be transferring £153,000 from the general fund to the housing revenue account. Sorry, £153,000 of debt will transfer between the two accounts as negative money. Is that within the competency of Housing and Communities Committee to do? Because my understanding was that a couple of years ago the rules were adjusted so that movement of funding had to go to SPNR. I just wonder if we could get confirmation that what we're doing today is all fine according to the rules.
Thank you. Michelle, would you come back on that?
Probably one for Stephen Coyle, who's here.
Okay.
Hi, morning. Yeah, this has been discussed with our colleagues in corporate finance, and they're comfortable with the approach that this report comes to Housing and Communities Committee, and if that approval is made for the transfer of debt, then that's fine with them. It's a similar approach that we took with the Rio satellite properties a number of years ago, so we're just following that same approach.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further questions coming through. I'll just hold on just in case the chat's slow. Okay, there's nothing else coming through, members, so I'll quickly sum up. This report outlines the proposal to bring the site at Double Dykes, currently held on the General Fund and managed by the Housing Service, onto the Housing Revenue account. The provision of and management of a Gypsy Traveller site is a housing function, and the transfer to the HRA will bring with it significant advantages to residents who currently reside under an occupancy agreement. With the transfer to HRA, they will gain added benefits of a Scottish tenancy agreement, which includes further rights to assign their tenancy to a household member, for their tenancy to be succeeded, to repair and to exchange their home. Other benefits of the HRA over the General Fund are detailed in the report. After a comprehensive consultation, the residents at Double Dykes have indicated support for the transfer. However, those at Bobbin Mill still retain some concerns, and further engagement will take place to seek their agreement. Quite rightly, they must be satisfied on all points before moving forward. With the approval of this committee, consent will be sought from Scottish ministers to complete the transfer. And it is recommended that the committee approves, subject to the necessary Scottish ministerial consent, that Double Dykes site be transferred from the General Fund to the Housing Revenue account. And secondly, notes the ongoing dialogue and support as outlined in section 3.5 for residents of Bobbin Mill, and that the future report be submitted to the committee. Vice Convener, I'm moving the report. Could you second for me?
Yes, thank you, Convener. Yes, I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you very much. And we'll now open up for comment, and Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks very much, Convener. And firstly, can I say how particularly pleased I am that this report has come to committee with the recommendation to transfer the Double Dykes Gypsy Traveller site to the Housing Revenue account, and it will, I believe, be the first step in treating our Gypsy Traveller tenants equally with our council housing tenants. We're not the first local authority to go down this route, and it is a route actively encouraged by the Scottish Government. But as I said, when I was interviewed recently by the BBC's Alba Aorpa programme, it is for me the biggest move that we can make and need to make to improve the lives and living conditions of our travelling community. The community at Bobbin Mill, as you say, have yet to be convinced of that, so there is still work to do, because moving to the HRA, as we've heard, is the opportunity to deliver a whole range of benefits, more investment, improved planning and scheduling of routine maintenance, more effective consultation, greater participation on decisions and setting future priorities, and all of that needs to happen. I've met representatives of the community at numerous national Gypsy Traveller forums and events. The women from Double Dykes want this change to happen, and then they want to see significant improvements in site conditions and their chalets. Convener, visited Double Dykes during the first year of my first term as housing convener, meeting residents in their then brand spanking new chalets in 2008, and I remember how pleased they were with them then. 14 years later, and there's a clear and obvious need for attention, investment and action. And the residents want to get beyond the interminable mantra of waiting for the results of the stock condition survey, which seems to have yielded precious little in the way of useful detail. They want to see this council submit its application for Scottish Government funding to improve Gypsy Traveller sites, funding which after today's decision can be matched by the HRA and augmented by the 225,000 allocated but unspent from funds secured in previous budgets. There is, I think, concern amongst the community from past experience that they know that funds unspent on their site can suddenly be diverted elsewhere, and they don't want that happening again. The transfer, as Michelle said, offers far greater certainty and security. So, Convener, these women are putting their faith in this committee, the majority of whom they'll have never met and whose members have probably never been on the site either. Some of them believe that they've heard it all before, so I know that I'm asking a lot of them, and that they have asked and are entitled to ask who are the councillors that are making the decision. So the real proof of the pudding will be in how today's decision is taken forward, and the commitments and actions match our ambitions. So let there be no doubt that this is the right thing to do. There's a new generation of young families on site, and we need a new start and then to follow through for the next 14 years and more. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett, and very, very apt words. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Convener. My comment is actually Councillor Matthew is having problems with his chat function and asked me to put that in so that he can have a comment. But while I've got the mic, I'll just say I agree completely with what Councillor Peter Barrett has just said. I think how we support this and help this community going forward is very, very important, and this is a great step forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Massey wants to have a word.
Thank you,
You're there. Thank you.
Yeah, apologies for not having my camera on. I've got real problems with the internet today. My thanks go out to the people that have put this report together for us. I'm really pleased that the Scottish Government have allocated £124,000 to improving the lives of the gypsy travellers at Double Dykes, which is in my ward. I especially like the concept of the happy cabin, where residents can access on-site healthcare and support. I like this so much that I'd ask of this council for the same level of provision to be rolled out across the schemes in my ward, in fact across Perth and Kinross. We may be able to utilise buildings that are already there, or as will be done at Double Dykes, a modular building may be needed. Healthcare and access to healthcare are a fundamental human right. If we as a council can make access to healthcare easier for our residents, then this, I believe, will have a knock-on effect of not only improving the health of the population, but also allow our Scottish NHS to target where provision of services are most required. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I can't see any other comments coming through, so am I happy to say we are all happy to recommend and accept the report?
Agreed. Happy to accept.
Fine. Thank you very much. And that actually brings us to the end. That's the last item on the agenda. However, before we close, as I said at the beginning, and I would like to say a few words. This is the last Housing and Community Safety Committee of this term of the Council. And I certainly didn't want to leave it without saying something. So firstly, I'd like to offer my thanks, as the Vice Convener did, to the police and fire for the work they do for our community, and obviously for being here on the committee and answering questions as and when put. I'm not going to name everybody because I should probably forget somebody and then that'll upset somebody. So just my thanks to all of them. Secondly, I'd like to thank all the officers who have participated in these committee meetings, answering all questions raised fully and frankly. David and Lee on the Community Planning Partnership, of course. And then on housing, and this is going to sound like an Oscar award ceremony, Claire, Elaine, Michelle, Norma, Nicola, June, Stephen, Martin, Jackie, and I'm sure others I've missed, but their input is very much appreciated. Of course, it is not just their work here we should acknowledge. They and colleagues keep the housing service running to a high standard, and we shouldn't forget that, and my thanks to all. This is also an opportunity to thank all our tenants and the communities they reside in for their help during the pandemic, which no one expected, and for their patience and understanding as the housing service fought to catch up the backlog of work. And my thanks to Barbara for her ongoing advice and guidance, which has always been appreciated. As a committee, I'm sure that we would all agree that we work to the same goal, that we look to provide good quality, safe and secure housing that our tenants can call home, and in today's need, that is energy efficient to run, thereby reducing fuel poverty. Sadly, the pandemic has resulted in much delay in ongoing works, but I know the dedication of our officers will ensure that those works will be done in time. And on that note, as a committee, I'd like to thank all of you for your experience, your input and your comment. I have served on the committee from the beginning of this session 5 years ago, first as a member of it, then I had the privilege of working with Councillor Barrett, his vice convener, and then the privilege of taking on the job of convenership. And it has been a privilege overall to work with all of you, and I mean that. My final thanks to Chris for his work as vice convener. Undoubtedly, he has been a great help and support throughout my time as convener. I'm not going to get my knuckles wrapped for saying anything political today. You can all guess my hopes for the outcome of the upcoming election. However, if any of you are not standing in the election, may I wish you every success for the future. And if you are standing again, then it would be unsporting of me not to wish you all the very best. And with that, to all of you, good luck and Godspeed. Thank you. And we'll bring the meeting to an end. Thank you very much.